Just want to welcome everybody to another North Carolina Botanical Garden Lunchbox Talk, and welcome to our Zoom audience as well. So I am Joanna Matthew-Lalikas. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Botanical Garden. And with me today, I have David Michaud, who is the person behind the scenes on the Zoom audience, and he's there to help with Q&A and keep all the technical aspects running well. And let's see, we have folks tuning in from around North Carolina beyond our in-person audience. And I believe I saw we have folks from Illinois and Virginia. Grateful to have Johnny here with us today, Johnny Randall. He's here to talk about a very timely, time-sensitive, seasonal topic. And he's going to be talking about the Fig Buttercup Project. He is the Director of Conservation at the North Carolina Botanical Garden and adjunct faculty in the UNC Chapel Hill program in Environment, Ecology, and Energy. He received a bachelor's degree in biology from UNC Charlotte and both a master's and PhD in botany and plant ecology from Virginia Tech. Johnny served as biology faculty at UNC Greensboro and at the University of North Florida for a total of 10 years before coming to the North Carolina Botanical Garden in 1998. His primary responsibilities here at the garden are to oversee the conservation and management of approximately 1,200 acres of natural areas, administer conservation seed programs, and help direct rare plant recovery projects. He also does research on rare plant reintroductions and habitat restoration and rehabilitation, and teaches classes on nature preserve design and management, rare plant biology, pollination ecology, and conservation biology. Johnny serves on the NC Plant Conservation Program, Scientific Committee, and several other boards and commissions, including the NC-Invasive Plant Council. Johnny, thank you so much for taking time to share this important topic today.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you all for coming out today. And hello to all of you in TV land. I'll just get right to it. But before I start getting into it, I do want to acknowledge, number one, that there are 5 people in our conservation department here at the Botanical Garden, and all the things that Joanna mentioned that I do. Other people are certainly involved with many of those and actually take the lead on some of those particular projects. I also want to thank all of the people who I've listed here, but there are others as well who have contributed to this project, but these are the ones that came to mind right up front, especially Emma Rast and Andy Kolarova, who were our interns on this project through the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council, but also Julie Tuttle, who is kind of she keeps us organized, and I'll talk more about Julie in a bit, but in particular, Ann Prince, who sadly passed away 2 years ago now, who really was the one who got us interested in really working on Ficaria verna in our area and elsewhere. So welcome to Chapel Hill. Changing the subject for a minute. So what's going on here? Why did I even show this? This what? This is Bradford pear, and it's been in the news a lot lately because of this bounty that has come about through NC State, Department of Forestry, but a lot of other municipalities and states have done the same thing to try and get rid of this scourge. However, most of the work that's being done is within urban areas for this plant. And this is one that has truly escaped into the wild, and it will be very difficult to call this back. All the money that's being put into the urban areas is great, and all the tree exchanges and things like that. But a lot of resources need to be put into removing this plant from the wild, where there are probably many more plants in the wild now than there are in the cultivated environment. So just want to point that out. So let's get back to the main subject for today. So this is a plant that has often and probably for 100 years masqueraded as marsh marigold, a native plant, which occurs in our mountains, but further also in the Northeast. And it's been sold in the trade. Ficaria verna used to be called ranunculus verna, and I'll get to that in a minute. But at any rate, there's a lot of it that is, has, like I said, masqueraded as a native plant because they're very similar, but have very distinct differences. But it's still recommended by nurseries, local botanical gardens still display this plant. So, anyway, we'll get more into that later. If you go to this big plant finder site at the Missouri Botanical Garden, they call this, it says do not plant, this is a noxious weed. But then if you look at the next link down, if you do an internet search, it's all the different varieties of this plant that you can find either ordering online or whatever. So it's still out there for sure. The plant that is confused with it is this marsh marigold. I don't know that my cursor is going to show, my pointer is going to show very well, but they're very distinct differences. One of the major differences are these tubers in the roots, but above ground, this plant has serrated edges. The flowers look very similar though, so that's why it can be confused. There are a lot of things in the ranunculus family, the ranunculaceae, that look very similar to one another, but I'll be showing more comparisons of this. But this is just one way of telling the difference between the native lookalike and the herbaceous invasive. Now, this plant is outlawed in several states. These are just 3 examples of where it's outlawed in the Pacific Northwest, widely. It's in Kentucky. It's against the law to sell it. Even in South Carolina, it's against the law to sell this plant in South Carolina. But it's okay to buy it in North Carolina. And we'll talk more about that later too. So these are just some of the characteristics of this plant. It's easily recognizable. It's typically, it's referred to as having a reptilian look to the leaf. You can see that. The flowers look like a ranunculus flower. But 2 things that make this plant very difficult to control and why it's so invasive are these little tubers in my hand there, but also the parts of the plant that are spread very easily by water, which are called little bulbils. They occur at the base of the leaf, at the base of the petiole. And these form later in the season and just drop off. They wash away or they get, I worked with this one fellow who was trying to remove it here in town. And right as the bulbils were maturing, he was getting impatient. He mowed his whole area and all he did was disperse millions of these bulbils. So at any rate, don't mow this plant. You can mow it right now, but don't mow it after flowering. So I wanted to point out too that, I'm not talking about non-native plants in general, because there is this range of effects that non-native plants have. Every one from the ones that don't persist after cultivation, like our fruits and vegetables that we so enjoy, they pretty much depend on us for their survivorship. But then there are ones that persist after cultivation but don't spread, and then there are ones that spread vegetatively and by seed after cultivation, spread only in human-created environments like weeds, like this Plantago lanceolata here. That's not a problem, In fact, I like seeing this plant, non-native European weed, but it's a plant that does well in harsh urban environments. It doesn't get into natural areas. They're the ones that spread into native habitats, but do not reduce natives. The ones that spread into native habitats and do reduce natives. And then the worst kind are the last ones that spread into native habitats, change ecosystem function, alter composition, or reduce natives. And that's where Ficaria verna fits. I wanted to point out that if you ever look at Carolina Gardener, and there's a whole stack of them in there and a stack here, for 2 years in a row, the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council has purchased the back page. with a little bit of information. But what's really handy is that there's a QR code that you can, if you have a QR reader on your phone, which are free if you haven't downloaded one, but it will take you to the Ficaria project of the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council. A lot more information there. So it's an easy way to get more information. 2 years ago, there was in the News and Observer an article on Fig Buttercup that was on front page news. And we got a lot of press from that and interest. And the reporter, here's me, Pete Schubert, who's in the audience today. And this is Ann Prince, who, like I said, sadly has passed away. But these are the folks just down the road from here who met with the reporter, and they were featured in this article. And so that was a perfect example of one of the homeowners was ready to just get rid of this thing. The other homeowner said, well, it's pretty and you're not going to get rid of these anyway, and blah, blah, blah. So, there's the typical conflict that you can have within a family, but also just in the general population as well. This is upcoming. So we have a magazine here at the Botanical Garden. There's going to be a little article on this based on what's written on the Fig Buttercup site. But also there are other organizations around here that are cooperating with North Carolina Invasive Plant Council, the Botanical Garden. This is a least wanted species alert from Duke Forest. Nature Conservancy is working with us. Triangle Land Conservancy, Eno River Association, Ellerby Creek Watershed Association. A lot of different groups are working together locally to try and eradicate this plant, because we are still, I think, able to call it back and not let it get out of hand the way that Bradford pear and other things have. So the USDA, APHIS, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, they do what's called risk assessment for all kinds of plants, especially weedy plants like this. And they did a very comprehensive weed risk assessment for Ficaria verna some years ago. So first, let me point out, this is a map from a site called BONAP, the Biota of North America program. And every one of those little blue dots is a county where there's a known occurrence of this plant based on a herbarium specimen. So there's more out there than that, but these are documented occurrences. This is the risk assessment that USDA did. And so in this axis, I'm just at the focal point where I can't read from here very well, but my glasses aren't going to work either. So, so this says impact potential in this axis and establishment and spread potential. So the green are, low potential, medium, and all these red are known invasive plants and characterized on this particular figure. And the black square is where Ficaria verna falls. So there's tremendous potential for this thing to spread and become a truly horrible plant in our area. It already is in the Northeast. We don't have to convince anybody. They also show what the potential spread is going to look like in this risk assessment. And that's pretty depressing. I mean, it means that we really need to work hard to get rid of it while we can. There's another website called EdMaps, and this tracks invasive plants. This is out of the University of Georgia. And so this is the current distribution on EdMaps, county maps. And these are sightings that people have uploaded to EdMaps. So it's similar to other distribution maps. And this is what EdMaps, the people who run that, think that the potential spread is going to be right now. And so right now it's stable in Orange and Durham and Wake counties, according to EdMaps. However, I think there's a lot less than there was when these data came out, because we've been working on it. One thing that people who talk about invasive plants like to put up is this invasion curve. And So this is, in this axis, the area infested over time, and then the control costs as well. So here's a plant. It's introduced, a non-native plant. And then you first detect this plant having moved out of the cultivated environment. So there's this detection phase. And then you go up this occurrence over time of the area infested. And there is an area within this invasion curve where eradication is possible. But then you get to a point where it's just not possible. And I think where we are right now with Ficaria is about right in here in North Carolina. Bradford pear, I think, is up here. Chinese privet is way up here, okay? So it's here to stay. But I want to talk a little bit about just some of the information that you can get from the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council website, as well as from our botanical garden and lots of other really great resources if you just do an internet search for invasive plants. But we have developed what's called the shun list. And this is a list of plants that are readily available in the trade. It's not things like stilt grass and microstegium, things that you wouldn't find in a nursery. But it's things that you tend to find in nursery that are for sale. And NCBG came up with this list looking at the mountains, Piedmont, and coastal plains specifically. And these are the plants that you know, it's not a long list. You can have it on your phone. And if you go into a nursery and the plant you want is on this list, then we ask you to shun it and not purchase that plant. It was in 2019, there was a joint meeting of the North Carolina and South Carolina Invasive Plant Councils in Gastonia. Janie Farlow, I'm getting her name wrong. Jamie, anyway, I'm close. I'm sorry? Marlowe, thank you. She has been talking about this plant for a long time and trying to get people to pay attention. So she gave a presentation on that. And when the people at the conference center hotel were getting things set up, they saw her slide, and you know, one of the varieties of Ficaria verna is called brazen hussy. And so they decided that they were going to make a special cocktail for this conference. And there it is, the brazen hussy. Oh, there's Jenny's name right there. Anyway, so it was pretty good. It was a lot better than having Ficaria verna around. So what is our Fig Buttercup project? This is something that we developed a couple of years ago with the help of interns and all of our members of our board. Information on why it's a problem. But the main part of the project was to hire an intern who could look at where these occurrences are and get people out there to find new occurrences using iNaturalist or other means. And so the main part of the project was to look at the Sandy Creek area of Durham. So here's Jordan Lake. Here we are in Chapel Hill over here. So Sandy Creek feeds into New Hope Creek that comes down through Orange County. And we knew that there was a huge infestation there. A lot of neighborhoods and such where this plant occurred and occurred along Sandy Creek. So the goal was for the intern to contact all the landowners who had occurrences on their property, and then to find out if our volunteers could go in and verify that occurrence, and then ask if they were okay with us controlling it, unless they wanted to do it themselves or hire a landscape company. So that was the main focus of the project, and it worked out great. We found a lot more occurrences once we got out there, but we got a lot of permission to spray, and I'll get to spraying in just a second and why that is important. But there's also information on the Fig Buttercup site on how to make an observation and upload it to iNaturalist. And if you're unfamiliar with iNaturalist, there is a tutorial on how to get started. It's quite simple. You take a picture. You want to make sure your GPS, your location is on. You upload it, you take a picture, and it goes right, and our project can pull that right in for getting the distribution data. Or if you'd rather do something the old-fashioned way, you can email. Some people might not want to email someone with the email address figbuttercup@gmail.com, but it's okay. Or you can actually get in touch with other people in general, and you'll see some of the people in just a second. So this is the iNaturalist Fig Buttercup in the Triangle Region project that Julie Tuttle started. And you can see that she is the primary observer. Can you see the number there? I can't read that. How many? 1064. Okay, 1,064 plants that she has identified, her occurrence that she has identified herself. And so lots of data on iNaturalist about Fig Buttercup. And what's nice about this is that there are, before it gets like uploaded to the site, there is an expert, Julie and some others, who verify that that is indeed Fig Buttercup. It's not just, you can't put up a violet and misidentified, or our native Caltha palestris. Just recently, another iNaturalist site popped up for the Triad region for Fig Buttercup. And the Native Plant Forum on Facebook, there's a lot of chatter on there right now for these occurrences and people looking for information on how to get rid of this plant. So there's a lot going on with this plant outside of the things that we do within North Carolina Invasive Plant Council. So here's the Sandy Creek watershed again, and let me just zoom in on that a bit, talk about exactly how we went about that. So this is Sandy Creek and the neighborhoods associated with that. I mean, you will recognize some of these landmarks if you've ever crossed I-40 going to Durham, if you've ever crossed New Hope Creek going into Durham. There is what some people call No Hope Commons. And so this is Sandy Creek. New Hope Creek flows down through here. These are the Corps of Engineer wetlands. And this is where we really want to keep it out of. Once it gets into these wetlands and these floodplains, it's going to be very difficult to control. And this is just a closer look at that. All of the occurrences along Sandy Creek. And this is just a larger map. And just of the whole general area where we believe occurrences occur, but this is the Sandy Creek zone where we're concentrating our efforts. And this is what the spreadsheet, the data looks like. You know, we have the landowner, we have their address, phone number if we have it, and then more contact information. And this is just some of us visiting with the landowner. Actually on New Hope Creek, this is probably one of the most upstream locations of this plant. And so it's critical that we get rid of it from this particular site. I won't say anything more about that. Another app that we tried to see how useful it would be. It's something called Tracks. And so you can actually walk along and then just ping, and it uploads where you have walked and where you see occurrences. So some people like doing this kind of stuff. I mean, me personally, I would rather be looking around for it with a backpack sprayer on and actually squirting it as I see it, rather than report that it's there with the hopes that somebody's going to get back to treat it. But anyway, this was an interesting exercise with, you know, a fairly sophisticated program. So who are you going to call? In Raleigh, in Durham, in Orange County, in Chapel Hill. So, and this is all on the Fig Buttercup site. So you can find people to get in touch with if you want to speak with them by phone or by email. And they will take down this information, and we will be able to pay more attention to it. There are some native lookalikes. The flowers don't look alike so much, but the foliage can. So here is Ficaria verna right here. And then there's this and this. These are little violets, you know, and you have to really be careful. You know, you're walking along, and I mean, without my glasses on, I couldn't tell those two apart right here, but there are very distinct differences. This reptilian look, very prominent veins. This has a much more heart-shaped base, but these are typical plants that co-occur. So you have to really be careful when you're in these wetlands. So our realm here in the Chapel Hill area is what it looks like. The different occurrences that we have. This is what is so frightening, is when you see this big clump just hanging on the bank of a stream or a drainage ditch or something like that. And there's a lot of places that are like that in our area. I'll get to a better map of this in a second. But so this is, if you're familiar with Chapel Hill, these are the Rainbow soccer fields. 15501 is out here. This is the Glen Lennox area in this, and this is where I have been paying a lot of attention to working on this plant. This is combination of UNC and Town of Chapel Hill land, and I have permission to be treating plants in this particular area. But first, I want to zoom out a little bit and look at a 4-county area of the occurrences. Now, this is brand new. This is iNaturalist data today, just about an hour ago. So these are all the occurrences. And if we go a little closer, so this is Battle Park. And if you click on any of these little pins, the information will come up on who identified it, when, and more information about it. So there's so you can find out something about it. These are the sites I was just talking about over by the Rainbow soccer field. So here are the soccer fields. Here's 15501. The botanical garden's just right down here. So, but this patch that was noted in 2021, that's not there anymore. Okay, so our natural area steward has taken care of that, as well as some of the others that are in this area. I'm not sure who, this is Bowling Creek that goes through Chapel Hill and Carborough. I'm not sure who's working on Bowling Creek. Pete, do you know who's working on Bowling Creek? No, we need to think about that. Yeah. So, and this is this path from the cultivated landscape to the urban natural areas and then into wildland. So this is that site right down the road from here. Here's the Glen Lennox Shopping Center, Fresh Market, Botanical Gardens down here. So this is that site, okay? Huge infestation, but the landowner is very willing to be working on this, and we have been working on him. Well, we did work on him at first, but we're working with him now. And this was the path that it took. That drains, it goes underneath the highway here, and it goes through a pipe, but then it pops out, and it's this essentially a drainage ditch down through here where the occurrences are. But then here's Little Creek, and here's Booker Creek coming in. So once it gets into Little Creek, where is it going? Jordan Lake, okay? And the thousands of acres of wetlands and bottomlands that are in Jordan Lake. So we do not want that to happen. So we're working our best. I was actually, so I brought some show and tell today, some live plants, and I went out this morning and dug them up from out here. And I noticed that there's like maybe 2% of what used to be out there because of me working out there for the past 2 years, multiple times going out there. And this is what it looks like on that site. Okay, again, hanging off the banks of this drainage ditch. And all it takes is for that clump to slough off. And those bulbs that I showed you that are attached are just going to break off, or the whole clump will float downstream and become established. And later in the season, when you have those bulbills, they just drop off this plant into the water and are washed away. And this is what it looks like when you get into natural areas. So this is New Hope Creek. This is completely shrouded with Ficaria on this side, and then there are a few clumps on this side. So it's getting out there and it needs to be looked at and taken care of. So there are different treatments you can use. And so the house that my family and I moved into not far from here 20 some years ago, it was a volunteer who was a longtime volunteer at the botanical garden. We bought her house and she had all kinds of stuff planted all over the place. And I just always assumed that this yellow thing that would pop up in the early spring was some marsh marigold. And it wasn't until I became aware of Fig Buttercup that I took a closer look and went, damn, that's in my own yard, my backyard. So I thought I would try and experiment there. Rather than use herbicide or try and dig it out, which is difficult, I put cardboard on it and mulched it on top. And this is what it looked like the next spring. Okay, it's very difficult. It comes right up through that cardboard. You might be able to use multiple layers, but this would be a place where it could be done on a small scale. There's no way you could do this on large scale because it would, of course, kill everything else that's out there too. So the Smother treatment could work, but it's a small scale remedy. Then there's mechanical control. Julie Tuttle produced, along with Pete, this really nice video that you can find at this link of Pete showing how to extract this plant with a shovel. Now, this only works well if you have all the time in the world. There's isolated clumps that are especially, you know, like this one's getting ready to fall into New Hope Creek here. This is actually on the border. This is Hollow Rock Park, right? Yeah, so this is town of Chapel Hill, Orange County natural area, and it's right adjacent to Duke Forest. So there's a great video on how to dig it up and to get these, but it takes a long time to do that. And you have to be so careful because the bulbs break off easily and it's just not a viable thing to do if you have a lot of plants that you have to deal with. You could do this in your own yard if there are a few clumps, but it's really difficult to manage this on a large scale. Which means that chemical control is the only thing that makes sense in especially larger infestations. And what we recommend is an aquatic approved glyphosate formulation. And there's several products out there that can be used. And we use a 2 to 2.5% solution. So, and this is just the label off of one of those. So you want 2%. So if you want 1 gallon, you want 2 2/3 fluids ounces per gallon in that. So, so that's a great way to figure out a herbicide ratio. But if this plant, so glyphosate is non-selective, and if this plant is in your lawn or in places where there are grasses that you don't want to kill, this is non-selective. And so if you're in an upland site where you don't have the chance of, I mean, even with an aquatic approved formulation, I still don't like to spray it on water or even get it into a water body. But if there was to be some runoff, and you want to pick a day when it's not going to rain. Most of these products are what are called rain safe after just a few hours. So, so they have things that, products that get them to stick to the leaf and are absorbed. But anyway, if you are in an upland site and it's in a lawn area, you can get an off-the-shelf broadleaf weed killer that is more selective for dicots, for broadleaf plants rather than grasses. So it's something you can use if you want to. But we tend just to tell people to go with the aquatic approved glyphosate formulation. And this is that place where I just was, down by the Rainbow soccer field. So this is what it looked like. And this is just a small portion of it. There was a half an acre of this solid. And so that's one of the problems. What else is coming up right now in our areas like this? Trout lilies, spring beauties, bloodroot. And that completely eliminates all the spring wildflowers that we have. So this is just a small portion of that half an acre. And this is what it looked like not long after I sprayed it. And then plants further to decline. And like I said, today I went out there and there's just what's called a little bit of mop up to do. So this is what it looked like at the end of its season last year. So this is the end of this presentation, but it's not the end because we have a mission now to, if you're listening to this here or in TV land, trying to identify if this plant is flowering now, this few things are yellow flowered and in flower, and nothing else looks like this that's out there. We don't have Caltha palustris in our native woodlands and stream areas. Someone may have planted it in their yard, but for the most part, if you see a plant that looks like this, it's going to be Ficaria verna.
All right. Johnny, thank you very much for presenting today.